Hello everybody and welcome back to War Thunder Mobile. Today we're going to be looking at the Rank 8 Platinum Platoons and the rare vehicles. We're going to start off with the Khalid. Khalid has a 120mm cannon. I believe it is based off the Chieftain, one of the Chieftains at least. It has 300mm of penetration on its first round. Unfortunately, I don't have access to seeing which rounds these tanks have, so I can't tell you exactly which rounds they do have if I don't remember. 7.5 second reload time, which is decent, and pretty good mobility all around. The armor isn't great, but no tank's armor is really that great at rank 8 in the first place. The Vickers Mark 11 is a pretty fast vehicle that has a very high penetrating APFSDS round. It goes 116 kilometers an hour in its forward speed, which I believe is the fastest we have for a ground vehicle. There are very few maps where you're actually going to be able to get up to that actual speed, and with the fairly fast traverse speed, that does allow it to be a flanking beast. The Warrior does not have the other TOW-2B missiles or any TOW missiles of that type. Instead, this one has a Milan ATGM launcher, I believe. It has APFSDS rounds to its disposal last I checked, and it does have a very good speed forward and reverse. Very good for flanking, and of course the ATGM helps out in case a tank comes along. The Falcon, as we all know, is a terrible monstrosity on the battlefield with its very short reload speed as well as its very powerful penetrating rounds that it does use, and the armor that is very trolly because there are not a whole lot of modules to hit down here, making it difficult to kill with APFSDS and sometimes even with high explosive rounds. Overall, this platoon I'll give a 7 out of 10. It's not extraordinary, but it is pretty good. The Leopard A1A1L44 is an upgunned Leopard A1A1, of course, with a 120mm cannon and a standard 6.7 second reload. It does not drop in any mobility though, and of course because it is a Leopard we don't have much armor whatsoever, but that's normal by this point. The TAM2 IP has the Mexis composite screens, which allow it to take a lot of damage from ATGMs, but have it be no damage to the crew inside. You're going to have to use ATGMs that have a lot of explosive filler or high explosive rounds to properly kill this thing easily. Of course, you have the option of using APFSDS to go through the armor very quickly. As far as I can tell, the turret is one of the Leopard's turret, but that doesn't offer a whole lot of advantage to it. Though the TAM2 IP does have a fairly fast traverse speed, and it has a same forward and reverse speed at 82 kilometers an hour, allowing you to easily get around the map. The Class 3P is kind of ridiculous. It is pretty strong unironically. In a hold down position, you actually will have a pretty good time because it does have some composite armor. So if you are in a hold down and you find yourself fighting a IFE, you're easily going to be able to destroy it. Plus, the frontal plate allows you to potentially bounce against anti-air rounds. Of course, it does have great mobility, and it is a overall pretty good light tank. The Gepard we've talked about before in previous videos, so we're not going to cover it in this one. Overall, I'm going to give this platoon 8 out of 10. I would recommend getting it if you have the chance. The XM1 GM has a little bit more armor in comparison with the XM Chrysler's composite, with the composite going all the way up the sides of the turret, which the Chrysler does not have. And of course, the actual flat armor on it is more than the Chrysler. Besides that, the GM and the Chrysler aren't too different. They do have a similar speed as well as the same cannon. Due to the nerf of the APFSDS that the XM1 has, it's not as good as it once was, but overall it is still a solid vehicle to have. The XM803 still has its composite armor, and I believe its APFSDS also got a nerf as well. Though because this has more composite armor, it does give you more protection against anti-tank guided missiles, even though it's not by much. Plus you do have a 50 cal on the roof, which is very helpful, even though it's not exactly the 20mm that we saw in the earlier versions of the MBT. Of course, it doesn't lack any more in speed. This thing does have a 70 kilometers an hour drive speed, and I believe it does still launch a ATGM. The M3 Bradley isn't bad by any means. It has 25mm cannon, decent mobility, a okay reload speed. It could be better, but the ammo that it fires does have a lot of penetration, as well as the fact that it does have ATGMs. Though to fire the ATGMs, you do have to stop the vehicle, which isn't super helpful. This Bradley in particular does not have TOW-2B missiles, so you do have to aim directly at the enemy. The M247 York is a terrifying anti-air as of right now, because they have been penetrating every single thing that they've been coming across. Though if you can actually pen or overpressure an enemy that you shouldn't be able to, it's kind of a 50-50. The mobility is decent, and the armor is, again, very good for a SPAA. And with the turret traverse, it makes it overall a pretty good vehicle. This platoon was a lot better than it is now, but because of the nerfs, I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. The AMX-32 is a pretty good MBT. It does have really good mobility in the forward and reverse speed, pretty high penetrating APFSDS rounds, as well as the 20mm that the AMX-30s have. If someone tries to target the back right of your turret, you have a chance of that just hitting the radio station instead of your ammo. And of course the extra spaced armor on the bottom and the turret do help against certain types of rounds. The AMX-30B2 is pretty similar to the AMX-32, except the ammunition is back where it is for a normal AMX-30. Essentially, the AMX-30B2 is the Brenus without the Brenus package, so you don't have an APS. Even without the Brenus, this tank is decent, though it is not stabilized, which is an issue. The SK-105A2 Cuirassier is an Austrian tank with a 4-second reload and APFSDS rounds. It looks essentially the same as an AMX-13, though it does have, like we just mentioned, APFSDS. All of it is stored on your left side mostly, except for the ones that are in your turret. So if you carry more than 12 rounds, you have a pretty big weak spot right there. Though this tank is really good at flanking, it does have a very high speed, a decent turret traverse time, though you are really shining with your 4-second APFSDS reload. This tank is one of the best for flanking at its rank, and I would highly recommend using it if you have the chance. The MX-30S DCA I believe we have covered, though just to briefly remind you guys, this thing does have a pretty decent penetration, and the armor is from the AMX-30 I believe, for the hull at least. I'm going to give this platoon a 8 out of 10 as well. The Type 16 FPS is a pretty fun vehicle. It has 110 kilometers an hour forward speed and 40 kilometers an hour of reverse speed, which is also decent. This tank has little to no armor, but even with that being so, it is really good. All of your ammo is mostly stored in the back, though there's a little bit to the side right here. Any high explosive rounds can easily deal with this vehicle. The ICVP is not one of the best IFVs, though it does have good mobility. It doesn't do a whole lot of damage, so you're going to have to try really hard to flank or just mainly kill anti-airs or IFVs. It does have a good turret diverse speed, of course, which does help, but it's not going to be the best. I believe the Type 74F does have access to a APFSDS round, which is very good. It has mediocre reverse speed, a standard reload speed, and the turret reverse speed isn't bad. Overall, a decent MBT. The Type 87 is similar to the Gepard, though it is a decent bit different, at least in the design. It does have these radars on top instead of one on the nose of the tank. And of course you do have this alloy right here, which offers you a little bit more protection for the crew, but in the reality it's not going to be a whole lot more. I have not seen these things flanking or being used to kill ground vehicles, so it might not be recommended for this vehicle to be used in that way, though of course because of what it is, it's going to be pretty good at shooting down aircraft. Not the best though, because it doesn't have HEVT, but decent at least. The XM1 Chrysler is not as good as it once was, again because of the nerf. Your composite doesn't cover as much as it really should. It has a decent amount of composite armor, more than the GM XM1, though there are these gaps in the top armor right here that if they are fired at right about here, or at the same height on the opposite side of the tank, it could just go through and hit your ammo rack, which would instantly kill the crew. Even with that being so, you do have spaced armor in the front as well as exterior fuel tanks that should partially keep your crew safe, at least the driver. It does have pretty good mobility for an MBT, and the turret traverse speed is quite high, though it does have those pretty large weak spots which can be easily exploited. The M60A1 Rise P is a little bit better as an MBT. It does have ERA, which is very helpful. It has a higher penetrating round, I believe. Last I checked, at least it does. And last time I used it, this one actually performed better than the XM1. Not to mention the Rise P actually does carry smoke, whereas the Chrysler does not. You are lacking a little bit more in mobility, but your protection is better. Again, the Bradley, we've already covered this, so we don't have to go over it again, as well as the M247 we've already covered, and we don't need to go over it again. Overall, this platoon, again, was better. It's slightly better than the XM1 GM, so I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. The Object 775 is a very low-to-the-ground MBT that only fires ATGMs, but if I remember correctly, it can fire them on the move, which is very helpful. It has a pretty fast reload speed for those ATGMs. By the time they hit the target, you're pretty much ready to fire another one, at range at least. And they are pretty high caliber, allowing you to do a lot of damage at once. It does have a fat layer of composite armor, though it's not necessarily a lot. It just covers a lot of the tank on the turret and the hull. It only does have a crew of 2 people, though the commander can fire the armament as well, which is very helpful. It doesn't have a very high speed, but its speed is pretty good, and the hull allows you to bounce APFSDS if you're hull down, which is very helpful. The turret itself is quite strong as well. The T62M1 is a upgrade variant of the T62. You do have some more composite armor on the side, as well as extra screens on the outside to help protect against high explosive anti-tank rounds and ATGMs. Your reload is longer at 8 seconds, which is not very good, though your APFSDS pen is higher. The T55AM1 is a similar story. It's essentially just an upgraded T55. This one does have a slightly better APFSDS round, I believe, though it only has a 100mm cannon, meaning it's not going to be the best APFSDS, mainly just because of the caliber, and the reload time is longer than the Western equivalents, so it's not going to be great in a 1v1 if you do miss your first shot, or if you both miss your first shot, I should say. The CSU-37-2, I don't remember if we have covered it before or not. It's a decent anti-air, though it's not quite as good as the Shilka because it only has 2 cannons. And I've never seen this thing being used as an anti-ground role, so wouldn't recommend doing that. Overall, I'm going to give this platoon a 9 out of 10. Overall, I'm going to give this platoon a 8 out of 10. The T62 isn't quite as good, though the Object 775 is incredible, and I would recommend using it. The T55 AMD is one of the few vehicles with a APS. This one is a hard kill APS, so it actually shoots out anti-tank guided missiles as well as high explosive anti-tank missiles at slower velocity from the air. Again, slightly slower reload speed, though the extra protection is very helpful in terms of the APS. Besides that, it performs pretty much the same as any other T55, though this one does carry ATGMs. The Object 685 is pretty good as a IFV. It has a 100mm cannon, which I believe can carry APFSDS rounds, though I might be slightly incorrect on that. Turret traverse time is pretty slow. It's in comparison with the Soviet tanks, but the reload time is faster than the majority of the Soviet MBTs. The speed, though, of course, is also quick as well, so it's very helpful in that regard. Pretty good at flanking. It could be used on the front lines, though I wouldn't essentially use it to do so. The IT-1, we all know the IT-1. I believe we've covered the IT-1. If we haven't, very trolly. You can fire ATGMs on the move. It is really easy to fire over cover and then just hit an enemy with it while they cannot see your tank at all. I would definitely recommend using it, mainly for that, and sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to kill with its interesting module layout on the inside. CSU-37-2 we have already covered, so we're going to move on. In total, the T55 AMD, in my opinion, comes out to being a 8 out of 10. It's pretty good. It's not necessarily the best because the T55 does have some weak spots, as in the lower hull can be hit with ATGMs, but given that and a few other variables, it's pretty solidly an 8 out of 10. The T69-2G is a pretty decent tank. It has a longer reload because it is not Western. Same mobility as the T55. I believe this tank is based on the T54 actually. It does have ERA, which is very helpful, and a 105mm cannon, which isn't bad. You do have your explosive reactive armor covering your fuel tank, which also hides your ammo, which is a very interesting layout to have, to say the least. It has okay mobility, but not exactly the best, and the turret traverse speed is somewhat slow for a rank 8 tank. Though the protection isn't bad, I wouldn't say it's great or good. The WMA-301 is a very high speed anti-tank vehicle. It does have a 400mm penetration round, which I believe is Heat FS. Last I checked, this thing can probably carry an ATGM and fire it on the move. Because of that, it's really good, and if I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure it's a tandem one too, which is really good for rank 8. It has the same reload speed as Western tanks, which is very helpful. The PTZ-89 is a pretty good anti-tank as well. 120mm cannon with a 5-second reload, allowing you to out-reload Western tanks. Has okay mobility, not too much indifferent from a T-55, and with a crew of 4, it's not all that bad. The armor is going to be a little bit of an issue. You could be penned by anti-air or any light tank really, but even with that being so, in a good sniping position, this thing could play really well. The PGZ-09, I think we've covered it before. It's essentially a Gepard, but with a different chassis. Decent speed, good reload, and okay penetration, but not essentially what I would use for anti-ground targets, though I think it does carry an AP round that could go through some lighter tanks. Overall, I'm going to give this platoon a 7 out of 10. The WMA does boost it a little bit because the tandem ATGM on the move with a 6.7 second reload is really good. And if I was going to use this platoon, I would use it for sniping more than anything. Now to our second last platoon, the Merkava. The Merkava is known for having a very trolly armor, with the armor not exactly being too difficult to pen for APFSDS using tanks, though the layout of armor on the inside, which is essentially just the engine taking up a whole lot of space, makes it pretty difficult to kill. It does have a lot of composite armor on the turret as well, which does make things difficult there too. It has a 6.7 second reload, okay mobility, mostly on the level of a T-55 or T-62. It's a pretty difficult tank to deal with, though it does play extremely well. There are some weak spots that you can hit, like right over here for this tank. That could easily knock out the turret crew, which I would recommend hitting. Though besides that, this thing plays extremely well, and I would highly recommend getting it if you can. The Magach Hydra appears to be a M60 with a set of Hydra 70s. These rockets aren't incredibly good, but they're not bad by any means. Has a decent reload speed. It's a little bit slower of an MBT, though it does have extra firepower, allowing you to deal with lighter tanks. Though they are not like the Calliope, which will aim at the height that you need them to be at to hit the target. They are unguided, so that makes it a little bit more difficult to hit the target. Even with that being so, it's a okay tank. The Giraffe is pretty much the exact same as the CM25, I believe. It has the exact same crew layout, and penetration is the same. I believe this also carries TOW-2B missiles. It is good if you can get into a hold down position where you're just got your ATGM peeking out, though the chances of you finding that position in most maps are somewhat difficult, and this thing is very likely to just die to pretty much any high explosive, so if you use it carefully, you can use it well. The ZSU-23 4V is pretty decent as an anti-air, very fast turret traverse speed, very quick reload time, decent mobility. It's got pretty much everything you need, though this is not built for hitting targets on the ground. Any targets in the air should be very fearful of this vehicle. It is very good at hitting air targets. I'm going to give this platoon a 7 out of 10. The Merkava is very terrifying, though the other vehicles in this platoon not so much. So that's going to lead us directly into our next platoon. The upgraded variant, the Merkava Mark IIB. I believe the Merkava Mark IIB has access to slightly better shells, though I didn't exactly check. The reload time is the exact same. The turret traverse speed, I believe, might be a little bit faster, but the speed on it, at least in reverse, on the Mark IIB is certainly better. The weak spot on the Merkava Mark I is pretty much half the size on this tank, so you're going to want to aim for right about here in the hull, which has a chance at knocking out the turret crew, though it's not exactly high. The Magach 6M is a upgrade variant of the M60 with both ERA and a dozer blade, which gives you additional armor. The penetration isn't the best and the speed isn't the best, but it is a better M60 than the Magach Hydra. The Tehran 6 is a pretty decent tank. It has, of course, the 8-second reload because it is essentially a T-55, though this tank particularly doesn't die extremely quick. In the video where I tried the Merkava Mark IIB way back when, I think I also mentioned in that video how when I was playing this for the first time, I was getting 0 damage from APFSDS rounds while I was hold down. It's a decent tank, though because of the slow reload, you're going to want to play it more carefully than others. And of course, the ZSU-23 4V we've already covered, so we don't have to cover it again. This is the last platoon of the video, because I do not have the AMX-40 or the other Type 74 platoon, yet at least. Overall, I'm going to give this platoon a 8 out of 10. Of all of them, if I could recommend one to purchase, it's definitely going to be the Object 775. I've had the most fun out of all these platoons using that one. Though, of course, the 255 AMD is very trolly, so you should get it if you can. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. It took forever to put together, and that's why I delayed it more or less. I hope you guys have enjoyed, and I will see you guys again soon in the next one.